Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. HTM here with another PTS update. If you're not aware, there have been significant changes happening over on the PTS server having to do with light and heavy attacks, specifically light attacks doing way less damage, but now restoring resources, and then heavy attacks doing more damage, but restoring 0 resources. I discussed this in a video on Monday. I'll have a link for that in the description if you want to check it out. But what I thought I would do now in this next video is kind of show you the live server versus the PTS server and look at all the values for light and heavy attacks for every type of weapon, from two-handed all the way to restoration staff, and see if the numbers that they've given us in the PTS notes really are true or not. And then at the end, I'll talk about basically what this would mean going forward in terms of DPS, what a new DPS meta might be, and then suggestions. If you have suggestions for the developers as well, make sure you put those in the comments section. Let us know what you think about the general light and heavy attack changes, and if you think they should be adjusted, tell us how. The development team has said that they are open to feedback at this point and that these changes are not 100% going to happen. They really just want to open it up to us as players and take it from there. So that being said, let's jump into some testing. All right, so in terms of what character and build I'm testing, this is just a Stamina Nightblade with no food buffs, no equipment, basically nothing except a weapon equipped on the front bar in terms of testing. You'll see the weapon damage and spell damage are equal and they're fairly low. 64 points into max stamina. It is a Stamina Nightblade. In terms of gear, like I said, absolutely nothing is equipped. I'm at CP 810, basically max rank, but no champion points committed at all. And then here we are on the PTS side. Same build, same stats pretty much. Weapon and spell damage are the same. 64 points into stamina, back on the Stamina Nightblade. Khajiit is the race, but that really won't affect our basic light attacks or heavy attacks. And again, no gear and no champion points. So we're going to start by comparing two-handed weapons. So here I am on the live server, and then I've split it. So the PTS server is on the left, live server is on the right. And we're doing two-hand light attacks. So about 182 on the PTS, and that's coming down from 820 there, you can see on the live server. That does match with what the dev team said. That's about a 78% decrease. For heavy attacks, 2133 on PTS. That's up from 1314 on the live server. That does match what they said in the patch notes as far as being about a 62% increase. Now, as I was testing this, I feel like the speed is a little bit slower on the PTS server. I don't know if it's just me or lag or what, but it definitely felt slower. So next up is dual wield. We see about 182 now is the value for light attacks on the PTS versus about that same 820 on the live server. So that's similar to two-hander, about a 78% decrease in your light attack damage. Now, once we look at heavy attacks, remember these are 2 attacks, so you have to add them together. But this does match what they said in the patch notes, which is about a 31 to 32% increase in damage for heavy attacks on the PTS versus the live server. The speed appears about identical. So on to sword and shield, we're down to 169 damage for a light attack versus 765 on the live server. Again, that's about a 78% decrease. 1477 versus 1192, that's about 24% more damage, as they said in the patch notes. And you do notice the speed, I will say, especially when you just hold down heavy attack, you end up getting quite a few more heavy attacks in. So the speed is definitely faster there. All right, with bow, we're going to see about the same thing. 765 currently on the live server, and 152 on the PTS. So that matches that about 78% decrease for light attacks. Now, in terms of heavy attacks, these do feel a lot faster. In terms of the damage, we can see it moves up just slightly to 1790 versus 1600 on the live server, essentially a 12% increase in damage. You know, it's interesting like why some weapons would have more heavy attack damage than others. That's definitely something to consider. You know, does that have to do with attack speed? Does two-hand do more damage because it's slower? What's the reasoning behind that? They haven't really explained that, in my opinion. So moving on to the Inferno Staff next, we've got 562 as the current live server value, 152 on the PTS. Interestingly, that has a lower decrease than what they mentioned in the patch notes. That's about 72% decrease for overall light attack damage. Then we look at heavy attack damage, 1201 on the current live server versus 1800 on the PTS. So that is about a 49% increase, which is accurate with what they mentioned. Ice Staff is exactly the same. You have 562 live, 152 PTS. Same value for the heavy attack. And then when we talk about speed, really, you do notice this a lot on both the Inferno and the Ice Staff. If you start them at the same time, you'll see the Inferno and Ice Staff finish much, much faster. Feels a lot snappier, and you can end up getting a lot more heavy attacks in the same amount of time. So that speed increase is definitely noticeable for both Flame and Ice Staff. Now looking at the Lightning Staff, same values here for light attacks, 562 on live versus 152 on the PTS. Now, as far as the heavy attack channeling of the Lightning Staff, this is where it starts to get a little bit weird. You can see the channeled value increased quite a bit here. 300 on the live server versus now 529 on the PTS. That's over 70% increase. When you look at the last damage tick, instead of the 500 damage that we see on the live server, this is now 1866. That's almost a 300% increase. That's definitely more than what they said on the patch notes, which I believe was like 190%. So it seems like there's a lot of extra damage here for channeled attacks. We'll see this on the Restoration Staff as well. Same values for light attacks, 562 versus 152. That's our typical decrease. But then for the last hit of the channel, again, we have 431 on the live server and then 1841 on the PTS. I don't know if that means that it's direct damage. They did say that it can be dodged, so that's what I'm guessing. The last hit is direct damage. Over a 300% increase, so that is slightly more than what they mentioned in the patch notes. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. I don't know if they're going to adjust those numbers in the future. And then I figured, why not? Let's just jump into some unarmed combat. We did see the same decrease in light attack damage, 454 versus 100. And then just that slight increase on heavy attack damage. Again, just keep in mind, these are all with white quality weapons, no gear, no champion points. So obviously the damage will scale up. I just wanted just a baseline number for everything. All right, so we're almost done here. I just wanted to look at the channeled movement speed very quickly. This is a nice change in my opinion. So basically you can move at full speed while channeling a bow, a lightning staff, flame staff, restoration staff. And it used to be on the live server where you would slow down quite a bit. So I think this is a nice change for like trials or veteran dungeons where you need to avoid mechanics. Even PvP, this is a nice change. But of course, you don't get the resource restore from a heavy attack anyways. You know, I think the general use of heavy attacks is maybe going to go down a lot. And so that's where I want to talk next about maybe what the next meta will be in terms of light and heavy attacks. I want to link to a really great post here from the PTS forum. This was posted by Code a couple of days ago, and he talks about the suggested changes and then gives some ideas for how this could be improved, and I really liked his ideas. One of the reasons why this is being changed is because it's not that intuitive. That doesn't make sense if you heavy attack, that those do less damage than a light attack because you're, winding up the attack and it's supposed to be stronger, so that makes sense. But it doesn't really make sense that light attacks restore resources while heavy attacks don't. I mean, actually, it doesn't make sense if you think about it that attacks would restore anything at all. It doesn't matter if it's a light or a heavy attack. I mean, does it really make sense that if you hold the button down for a split second longer, you don't get your resources back? To me, that doesn't seem to be helping newer players at all. And in terms of the end game players, I don't think they're really going to change their rotation very much. Light attack weaving will still be a thing. In fact, if you have all this resource gain on light attacks, that's going to mean that they'll be able to spec their build for even more damage, and you might see an even more sort of limited meta of builds in terms of DPS, where let's even look at racial passives. You don't need sustain anymore, right? So what's going to happen to Breton? What's going to happen to Redguard for endgame DPS? You might not need that sustain anymore. You can just run High Elf for Magicka, Orc for Stamina, and that's pretty much all you need because you're going to have all this sustain coming back from light attacks. So the suggestion that he made is that, attacks should just restore resources based on how long you hold down the attack button. So light attacks would restore a little bit, medium attacks would restore a little bit more, and then heavy attacks would restore the most resources. I like that idea, and I think in terms of just making sense to a new player, That definitely makes the most sense to me. So I definitely recommend you check out that post. Of course, make sure you hop on the PTS forums and let the developers know what you think. There's several threads going there, and they are taking a look. I've seen a few developer comments on there already. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, make sure you hit that like button for me. Subscribe to the channel for more ESO news, updates, and builds. And I will see you all around in the next video.